Tom managed our family finances for decades. Then he fell for a phone scam and gave our social security numbers to a stranger. This man who'd protected our money for years suddenly handed over our most private information to the first person who called. He'd been running a high school for 30 years, handling budgets and angry parents simultaneously. But then he couldn't decide where to go for dinner. He'd stare at me like I'd asked him to solve impossible math. We spent 2 years with doctors who got it wrong. Midlife crisis, antidepressants, marriage counseling. Nobody mentioned Alzheimer's until Tom was 59, and we'd lost precious time we can never get back.
What Carol just shared represents thousands of families who've been told their loved ones' changes are just stress or getting older. As a physician who specializes in early Alzheimer's, I see this misdiagnosis pattern constantly. Today on Health SOS, you'll learn the 3 warning signs that 90% of families miss, the assessment tools you can use immediately, and the new treatments that can slow progression by 35%, but only if we catch it early.
Dr. Grant, for 2 years, I watched Tom change completely. He'd been running our high school for 30 years. Juggling budgets, dealing with angry parents, managing staff meetings all at the same time. But then suddenly, the simplest decisions became impossible for him. I'd ask, "Where should we go for dinner?" And he'd just stare at me, like I'd asked him to solve some impossible math problem. I kept thinking, maybe he's just burned out. Maybe it's depression from all the work stress.
Carol, what you just described isn't burnout or depression at all. It's something called problems with thinking and planning, and it happens when early Alzheimer's attacks the front part of the brain. Here's the thing most families don't understand. Everyone expects memory problems first, but when Alzheimer's hits people under 65, it often starts in completely different areas. The front part of your brain controls decisions and planning. When Alzheimer's strikes early, it goes after these areas first, not the memory parts.
But that's what was so confusing. He could remember everything perfectly. He'd tell me stories from 20 years ago with every single detail. How could that possibly be Alzheimer's?
That's exactly why early Alzheimer's is so tricky to catch. Only about 5 out of every 100 Alzheimer's cases happen before age 65. But these cases look completely different from what people expect. Instead of forgetting things, patients have trouble seeing things clearly, problems with words, or exactly what Tom went through. Big changes in personality and decision-making. The part of the brain that stores old memories often stays perfectly fine at first, while other parts are falling apart.
So when Tom started having trouble at work, like suddenly not knowing how to use the copy machine he'd used for years, getting completely lost trying to figure out the school's computer system, that wasn't just him getting frustrated with technology.
That was his brain actually breaking down, Carol. Early Alzheimer's often shows up as suddenly not being able to do things you've mastered for years. Tom's brain was losing the ability to put complex information together and follow multiple steps. Because these symptoms don't match what people think Alzheimer's looks like, it takes an average of almost 3 years from the first signs to getting the right diagnosis. During those years, families blame stress, depression, or relationship problems.
We went to 3 different doctors, Dr. Grant. The first one said it was a midlife crisis. The second one put him on antidepressants. The third one actually suggested we go to marriage counseling. Nobody even mentioned Alzheimer's until Tom was 59.
This delay in getting the right diagnosis is heartbreaking because we actually have treatments now. Drugs called lecanemab and donanemab that can slow down the disease by 27 to 37%. But they only work if we catch the disease early. These medications work by clearing out the bad protein buildup in the brain, but they work best when the brain hasn't been too damaged yet. Every month of getting the wrong diagnosis is a lost chance to help.
When that neurologist finally said early-onset Alzheimer's, I felt this weird relief. Not because of the diagnosis, that scared me to death, but because finally, someone was saying this wasn't Tom's fault. It wasn't him being lazy or depressed, and it wasn't our marriage falling apart. It was a real medical condition attacking his brain.
That feeling of relief you had, it is so important, Carol. And it shows families something crucial. Alzheimer's actually begins 20 years before anyone notices symptoms. The brain changes we can now see with special scans and blood tests start when people are in their 30s and 40s for early cases. Tom's brain had been fighting this disease for years before anyone saw the behavioral changes.
Learning that completely changed how I looked at everything. His need for everything to be exactly the same routine every day, getting upset when our plans changed even a little bit. I thought he was just becoming difficult and stubborn, but really his brain was desperately trying to keep some control when the world was becoming too overwhelming for him.
Exactly right, Carol. What families see as personality problems are actually the brain trying to cope with its own breakdown. The brain, sensing something is wrong, creates very rigid patterns to try to maintain some sense of order. Understanding this isn't just emotionally healing for families. It's medically critical for getting the right treatment while it can still make a real difference. If you just recognized your situation, the personality changes nobody understood, the years of wrong doctors, that moment when someone finally said it's not behavioral, it's neurological, hit subscribe right now. This information isn't taught in medical school. Share this with anyone who's watching their loved one change and doesn't know why. Now that we understand how early Alzheimer's attacks thinking and decision-making first, let's talk about what families can actually do with this information. There are 3 warning signs that 90% of families completely miss, but once you know what to look for, you can catch this disease years earlier. Carol, what was the very first change you noticed in Tom?
His relationship with money completely changed. Tom had always handled all our family finances. He did our taxes every year, managed our investments, paid all the bills online. But about 3 years before we got the diagnosis, I started noticing weird little mistakes, like he'd pay the same bill twice in 1 month, or he'd forget to cancel a subscription we weren't using anymore. Then the bigger, scary stuff started happening. He fell for one of those phone scams and actually gave someone our social security numbers.
Money problems are actually the most sensitive early warning sign we have for brain changes, Carol. Recent research from USC shows that people with early brain changes become much more likely to fall for financial scams, even before any memory problems show up. The parts of the brain that control judgment and figuring out risk get damaged first. Carol, did Tom realize he was making these money mistakes?
That's what was so scary about it. He had no idea anything was wrong. When I'd point out that he paid the electric bill twice or question some weird purchase he made, he'd get really defensive and angry. He kept insisting his thinking was perfectly fine and that I was the one being paranoid and controlling.
That's something we call not being able to see your own problems. It affects up to 8 out of 10 people with early Alzheimer's. The same brain damage that's causing the problems is also damaging the parts responsible for being aware of yourself. Here's what families need to check for right away. Are you seeing money errors that can't be explained? Is your loved one getting defensive when you question their decisions? Are they falling for scams they would have easily spotted before?
What should families do if they're seeing these warning signs? I really wish someone had told me to start writing things down and keeping track.
Absolutely, Carol. Create what I call a thinking baseline. First, write down specific examples with dates. Don't just say Dad's having money problems. Write March 15th, Dad paid the electric bill 3 times. Total 340 diyan. Second, start a 24-hour rule for any major money decisions. Any purchase over $500 gets talked about and delayed for 24 hours. Third, consider talking to a lawyer about financial power of attorney now, while your loved one can still be part of the conversation.
I also noticed Tom's driving changing. Around the same time as the money issues, he started avoiding making left turns, only driving on roads he knew really well, and getting really anxious about driving at night.
Problems with seeing space and distance are another early warning sign. The brain areas that control depth perception, understanding space, and navigation get affected early in Alzheimer's. Warning signs include only driving during the day, avoiding highways or complicated intersections, getting lost in places they know well, or having trouble parking the car. Carol, how did you handle talking to Tom about driving?
Terribly at first, honestly. I tried to just take his keys away, which led to huge fights. Tom felt like I was treating him like a child. What worked much better was gradually taking over driving duties. I became the driver for night events, then for highway trips, then for anywhere new we hadn't been before.
That gradual approach keeps dignity while keeping everyone safe. But families need a clear rule. If your loved one gets lost driving to a familiar place even once, it's time for a professional driving test. Most state motor vehicle departments offer assessments, or you can ask your doctor to request one. The goal isn't to punish anyone, it's to prevent accidents and tragedies.
The third thing I wish I'd recognized earlier was the sleep changes. Tom started having really vivid, disturbing dreams and would act them out physically, kicking, shouting, even falling out of bed sometimes.
Sleep behavior problems affect up to 6 out of 10 people who will develop Alzheimer's, often showing up 10 to 15 years before other symptoms. During normal dream sleep, our bodies are naturally paralyzed so we don't act out our dreams. When this protective mechanism breaks down, people physically act out what they're dreaming. If you're seeing this, write it down and see a sleep specialist right away. It's a very strong predictor that cognitive decline is coming.
So families should be watching for money mistakes, driving changes, and sleep problems, not memory issues?
Exactly right, Carol. Memory testing comes much later. These 3 areas, thinking and decision-making, seeing space and distance, and sleep regulation. These are your early warning system that something's happening in the brain. Carol, now that families know what warning signs to watch for, let's talk about what happens when they recognize these signs. What's the first concrete step a family should take if they're seeing money mistakes, driving changes, and sleep problems?
From our experience, don't just go to any regular doctor. We wasted 8 months with our family physician who kept saying Tom was just stressed from work. You need someone who actually specializes in testing thinking and memory problems.
That's absolutely right, Carol. Step 1 is finding the right kind of specialist. You need either a brain doctor, a doctor who specializes in older adults, or a psychologist who regularly tests thinking problems. Not all doctors are trained to recognize early patterns. When you call their office, ask this specific question. Do you evaluate patients under 65 for possible thinking and memory problems? If they seem unsure or suggest waiting until symptoms are more obvious, find someone else.
What should families bring to that first appointment? I really wish we'd been better prepared when we went in.
Bring that thinking baseline documentation we talked about earlier, those specific examples of money errors, driving incidents, sleep changes with dates and details. Also bring a complete list of all medications, including vitamins and supplements. Some medications can actually cause thinking problems that look like early dementia. Most importantly, bring someone who's actually observed the changes. The patient often can't accurately describe their own symptoms because their brain can't see the problems.
The testing process felt overwhelming to us. Blood work, brain scans, hours and hours of thinking tests. How long does this whole evaluation usually take?
A complete evaluation usually takes 2 to 4 weeks from start to finish. Here's what to expect. First, blood tests rule out fixable causes like thyroid problems, vitamin deficiencies, or infections that can cause thinking symptoms that aren't actually dementia. Second, brain scans, usually MRI and sometimes special PET scans, look for brain structure changes and protein deposits. Third, detailed thinking and memory tests check different brain functions. The good news is that new blood tests are making diagnosis faster and more accurate than ever before.
Let's say the diagnosis does come back as early Alzheimer's. What treatment options actually exist now? When Tom got diagnosed 18 months ago, we felt completely hopeless about the future.
The treatment landscape has completely changed in the last few years, Carol. We now have 2 FDA-approved treatments that actually slow down the disease, lecanemab and donanemab. These aren't just symptom medications that make you feel a little better. They actually slow down disease progression. In clinical trials, lecanemab reduced thinking decline by 27% over 18 months. Donanemab showed even better results in some measures, slowing decline by up to 35%. These drugs work by removing the bad protein deposits from the brain.
But there are downsides and complications, right? These treatments aren't simple or easy.
Yes, there are important things families need to understand. First, timing is absolutely critical. These medications only work in the early stages of disease, specifically mild memory problems or mild dementia phases. Second, they require confirmation that you actually have the protein buildup through a special PET scan or spinal fluid testing. Third, they're given through an IV infusion every 2 to 4 weeks and require very careful monitoring for brain swelling or bleeding side effects. Fourth, cost is significant, around $26,000 per year, though Medicare now covers lecanemab.
Is Tom a candidate for these new treatments?
Based on what you've shared about how he's functioning now, potentially yes. The key question is whether he's still in the mild dementia stage rather than more advanced. These treatments don't help once the disease has progressed to moderate or severe stages. This is exactly why early detection and diagnosis are so crucial. It opens up the treatment window while there's still time to help.
What should families expect realistically? These aren't cures that will fix everything, right?
You're absolutely right. They're not cures, and families need realistic expectations going in. These medications slow down progression, meaning patients keep their current thinking abilities longer. Instead of declining quickly over 2 to 3 years, patients might maintain their independence for 4 to 5 years. That extra time is incredibly valuable for families. More years of meaningful relationships, more time to plan for the future, and more opportunities for even better treatments that are being developed right now.
For families who are just starting this scary journey, what's the most important thing to know about making treatment decisions?
Speed matters way more than having perfect information, Carol. Don't wait for symptoms to get worse or for more convenient timing in your life. Every month of delay potentially closes doors on your treatment options. If you're seeing the warning signs we've discussed today, take action within weeks, not months. These diseases move relentlessly forward. Time that's lost can never be recovered. If you're ready to take action, whether that's documenting changes you're seeing, finding the right specialist, or having the treatment conversation with your family, comment below and tell us where you are in this process. Share this video with anyone who needs to know that early detection opens the treatment window. You're not fighting this alone.
Dr. Grant, I want to share something with families who might be exactly where I was 18 months ago, feeling absolutely terrified and hopeless after getting an Alzheimer's diagnosis. Yes, this disease is devastating and scary, but having the right information and getting into treatment early has completely changed what our family's future looks like. Tom is still Tom. We're still married and happy together. We're still making plans for our future, just differently than we thought we would.
Carol, what does planning differently actually look like day to day?
We moved up our retirement plans and decided to focus on experiences while Tom can still fully enjoy them. We took that trip to Europe we'd been talking about doing someday for years. We're spending much more intentional time with our grandchildren, making sure they really know their grandfather. But we're also doing the hard legal and financial planning work, getting our wills updated, figuring out power of attorney documents, making healthcare decisions, while Tom can still be a full partner in all these important conversations. The most important thing I learned is that getting this diagnosis doesn't mean your life just stops immediately. Tom started the lecanemab treatment I mentioned earlier. Yes, he has to go get IV treatments every 2 weeks, and yes, we have to watch carefully for side effects. But he's keeping his thinking abilities much better than we ever expected when we first heard the diagnosis. He's still driving during the day, still helping manage some of our household finances with me keeping an eye on things, still enjoying his woodworking hobby.
That stability Tom is experiencing, maintaining his abilities for longer, that's exactly what these new treatments are designed to achieve. Rather than the rapid decline families used to have to expect, we're seeing patients maintain their functioning and independence for much longer periods.
I also want families to know about all the support systems that are available that we had no idea existed. I thought we'd have to figure this whole thing out completely on our own, but there are so many helpful resources. The Alzheimer's Association has a helpline you can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number is 800-272-3900. They connected us with a local support group specifically for early Alzheimer's families. The conversations and support are completely different from regular Alzheimer's support groups because we're dealing with younger patients who are still working, still raising kids, still very much present and involved in life. There's also something called the AHEAD study that Dr. Grant told me about earlier. Families who have strong genetic risk can actually get into prevention studies before any symptoms even start. My daughter qualified for testing since Tom got diagnosed, and knowing her status, whether she's high risk or not, is helping her plan her own health monitoring and life decisions.
The AHEAD study represents what I think is the future of Alzheimer's treatment, stopping it before symptoms even appear. We're enrolling people as young as 55 who have elevated brain protein but no symptoms yet. The goal is complete prevention, rather than just slowing down progression once it starts.
For any family starting this journey today, here's my practical first step. Call that Alzheimer's Association helpline this week. Not next month when things get scarier, not when you have more time, this week. They'll help you find local specialists in your area, help you understand what testing to expect, and connect you with families who've already walked this exact path. They also have online education programs that teach you what to expect at different stages of the disease. Second step, start having the honest, difficult conversations with your loved one right now, while they can still participate fully in making decisions. Don't wait until thinking decline makes these discussions impossible or unfair. Talk about treatment preferences, care preferences, financial planning, even end-of-life wishes if that feels appropriate. These conversations are really hard and emotional, but having them while your loved one is still completely themselves is a gift to your entire family.
Carol, what gives you the most hope when you think about the future?
The research that's happening right now is incredible. Beyond lecanemab and donanemab, there are multiple promising treatments in clinical trials targeting different parts of Alzheimer's. Not just the protein buildup, but other brain problems, inflammation, even lifestyle changes that might help. Tom and I actually talk about this diagnosis as buying us time until even better treatments become available. In 10 years, early Alzheimer's might be a manageable chronic condition like diabetes, rather than this terrifying terminal diagnosis. But honestly, the biggest source of hope for me is meeting all the families in our support group who are not just surviving this diagnosis, but actually thriving despite it. Yes, their lives look completely different than they planned, but they're still having meaningful relationships, still contributing to their communities, still finding real joy in their daily lives. Alzheimer's definitely changed our family's story, but it absolutely didn't end our story. We're still writing new chapters.
Carol, that perspective that Alzheimer's changes your story but doesn't end it is exactly the mindset that helps families not just survive this diagnosis, but find ways to keep living fully and find meaning despite the challenges it brings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grant. I finally understand what I wish someone had told me 3 years ago, that early Alzheimer's doesn't look like memory problems at all, that families can actually prepare before everything becomes a crisis, and that getting the right diagnosis early opens up treatment options we never even knew existed. I'm so relieved to know that Tom's personality changes weren't his fault or our marriage failing. They were brain symptoms we could have caught much earlier.
Carol, your courage in sharing Tom's story today is going to help thousands of families catch this disease years earlier than they would have otherwise. The most important thing for everyone listening to remember is this: early Alzheimer's attacks thinking and decision-making first, not memory. Watch for money mistakes, driving changes, and sleep problems in people under 65. Remember, we now have treatments that slow progression by up to 35%, but only if we catch the disease early enough. For everyone listening today, Carol's story could easily be your family's story. The warning signs she completely missed for 2 years might be happening in your home right now. Here's exactly what you need to do immediately. If you recognize your loved one in Carol's story, the personality changes nobody understood, the decision-making problems, the defensive reactions when questioned about mistakes, take these 3 steps this week. First, start documenting specific examples with dates and details. Second, schedule an appointment with a brain doctor or specialist who evaluates thinking problems. Third, don't wait for memory problems to show up. Subscribe to Health SOS for more real people sharing real warnings that could save your family years of confusion and wrong diagnoses. Share this episode with anyone watching a loved one change unexpectedly. Comment below with your questions. Carol and I read every single response.